Welcome back. By now you should have your financial management in place as well as your tax strategies. The goal of this video will be to look at funding, different options for funding, and what makes funding important and where can funding be dangerous. First of all, I want to say, especially in South Africa but also globally, funding is a hot debated topic. And I meet so many clients and so many people that say they can't start a business because they don't have money. I want to assure you that where there's a will, there's a way. It's about being resourceful. So quick story. In the early 2000s, there was a company, pets.com, brilliant business idea. It got so much traction that the company managed to generate $300 million in investment before they traded a day in their life. Interestingly, the company went bankrupt. Versus, let's take a look at Apple. Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak starts the company with $1,300. Eventually, Steve Jobs has to fix the minivan, which means he had to spend $300 on that. Eventually, they only start the company with $1,000. Steve Jobs is desperate to make the company to work. He's got to be resourceful and he's got to pull out all the strings to make Apple a success. So what he does is, after Steve Wozniak builds the first Apple, he takes it to a convention. Nobody's impressed. One person stays behind and they say, I was interested, give me a personal view of how this computer works. So Steve Jobs goes to work, he sells the product. The next day he walks into this guy's bite shop and he makes a deal for 50 computers. The only problem is they have no resources, they have no staff, they've got no equipment, and they've got no factory to build 50 Apple computers. Steve Jobs doesn't give up. He calls the company that's got the equipment and he tells them, why don't you guys give me the equipment? I will pay you back after we've made the sale. Obviously they said, you're crazy, get lost. But Steve Jobs then goes and he takes the person from the bite shop to the equipment company. They negotiate, and that's how Steve Jobs got his equipment. That's the first problem solved. Second problem was workspace. Now we know that Apple started in Steve Jobs' father's garage, where he basically cleared half of the table and said to Steve, that's your area, you can build the computers here. And the last issue he had to resolve was staff. And that was easy. He just employed a couple of college friends. And that's how Steve Jobs was resourceful. Now the difference between the two, if you've got $300 million in the bank, there's absolutely no desperation to make the business work, which means you are comfortable and you are in your comfort zone. Whereas Steve Jobs had to venture past his comfort zone because he had nothing else in order to make the business to work. That in a nutshell should be enough to motivate you to not necessarily look for funding when you start or grow your business. However, there is a couple of funding areas I want to touch on before we continue. The first one is bootstrapping. Bootstrapping is basically using your own pocket money to get the business off the ground. In a nutshell, that's what Steve Jobs did, and that's how Apple was born. That's my favorite way to start a business. Bootstrap. Use your own money and owe nobody else anything. That's my motto. I want to go through life in full control of my financials, in full control of my business. That's just me. You're welcome to have a different view than that. The second type of funding is your substance funding, or rather that's what I call it. Now substance funding comes down to anything that's got substance that can be replaced with money. For example, let's say you need to start a logistics company and you need funding to buy a truck to do the logistics. That is an asset that you're buying, and if the company goes bankrupt, that asset can be turned around in cash again for the funder to get some of his money back. Another form of substance finance is your contract or tender finance. Let's say you win a tender, it's a done deal. You just need the operational expenses covered with a loan in order to execute the tender. It makes 100% sense to get funding for that because there's substance behind your funding. The third type of funding that you can look at is your normal business loans. That's very simple. Basically get a business plan, submit it at the bank and apply for a loan for your company. And the last one is equity finance. Now equity finance is more or less what you see on Dragon's Den and Shark Tank. I'm willing to give away X% of shares for a certain amount to help me grow the business. Now, equity finance, you got to make peace with the fact that once you give shares away in your company, somebody else is going to step in and call the shots with you. You don't have full control of your business anymore. So that in a nutshell is your different types of funding options. Again, I'm going to say I'm a big fan of bootstrapping and doing it yourself. However, asset finance makes sense, as well as equity finance, if that investor can really help you to multiply the business quicker than you could yourself. Lastly, I want to say a warning on funding, and that is, if you are looking to apply for funding to fund your operational expenses and your salary, you're making a big mistake. You are digging your own grave. I want to encourage you to go through your business, especially in the startup phase, and be bare minimum when it comes to your expenses. Don't over expand yourself with your expenses and with your salary, because now you want to take out funding to cover your operational expenses and your salary, and money is not coming in, which means you are getting more and more into debt. So that's a big warning sign and a big no-no. Stay away from that. I hope this gives you some insight on funding. Select the right option for you, and I will see you in the next video.